unless we're going to have something that we all agree to, we can't be put at the disadvantage of going by a treaty, limiting what we do when somebody else doesn't go by that treaty.
There are renewed fears tonight the U.S. and Russia are on the brink of a new era of nuclear conflict. Earlier today, the Trump administration announced it's suspending a 3-decade-old nuclear treaty with Russia, saying Moscow has been violating it for years.
Russia has jeopardized the United States' security interest, and we can no longer be restricted by the treaty while Russia shamelessly violates it. If Russia does not return to full and verifiable compliance with the treaty within this 6-month period, by verifiably destroying its INF-violating missiles, their launchers, and associated equipment, the treaty will terminate.
The treaty was signed between the two countries in 1987. It bans all cruise and ballistic missiles with a range between 500 and 5,000 kilometers. On the same day of announcing the planned pullout, Canada's Defence Minister is actually in Washington to meet his new U.S. counterpart. So was this issue discussed? Harjit Sajjan is the Minister of National Defense, and he joins us now from Washington. Hi, Mr. Sajjan. Great to see you. Thanks for your time.
Great. Good to see you again.
Minister, the U.S. chose today to suspend a key nuclear arms agreement with Russia, giving Russia just 180 days to verifiably destroy its missiles and launchers that violate the long-standing agreement, that the U.S. says violates the long-standing agreement. NATO released a statement in support of the U.S. position today, declaring that Russia has developed and fielded a missile system which violates the treaty and poses significant risk to Euro-Atlantic security. Are you supportive of the position expressed by NATO?
I mean, I just had the opportunity to actually meet with the acting Secretary of Defense for the second time here in Washington, and we discussed about the security challenges around the world and the unique defense relationship that our two nations have. And the INF Treaty violations by Russia is a concern for all of us, and we support U.S. positions on this. Because when it comes to any type of treaty obligations, especially when it comes to non-proliferation and disarmament, it requires all parties to live up to their obligations, and Russia has not.
Moving away from the treaty is definitely viewed by some as a move back towards something that evokes for many people a Cold War scenario. Do you view the action today as destabilizing? How would you characterize it?
Well, I think we need, this is, as I stated, it takes all parties when it comes to be in compliance to making sure that non-proliferation and disarmament occurs. Russia has not lived up to that obligation, and this decision solely rests on Russia's actions.
Do you view it as destabilizing, though?
It is, when it comes to, it does cause obviously concerns because this treaty is extremely important, but this treaty is not going to function if all parties are not going to live up to it. And however, there is a small window here where Russia can come into compliance, but it has to be verifiable.
What's your level of optimism that Russia will?
When it comes to the security challenge that we face around the world, and a person like myself, and when it comes to these things, we always have to have optimism that there always is an opportunity. I can't give any percentages on this. Regrettably, some of the actions that Russia have taken in the past, does call into questions any type of future optimism. But we are always hopeful, and in this opportunity, there is a 6 months window here before the U.S. decision comes into effect. So there is optimism that Russia can come into compliance within the 6 month period.
The INF was signed long before China had emerged as a nuclear power, and because of that, China isn't constrained by the treaty's obligations, at least when they were in effect. How important is it that any new nuclear arms treaties are expanded, that they include China?
It's I think when we look at the various security challenges, the INF Treaty was put into place to provide greater stability and confidence, especially into Europe. And we look at when it comes to any other type of security challenges or concerns that we have, not just looking at one. These are some of the discussions I think we do need to have, but they're much wider discussions, and the opportunity for me to be able to meet with Acting Secretary Shanahan. And I just want to mention, and I think it is important for Canadian viewers as well, because I also raised 232, the steel tariffs that's been imposed on Canada, and that's as a result of where Canada is considered a national security risk, and we find that extremely insulting. So I raised this.
What did your counterpart say?
I think they agree, because when it comes to our defense relationship, is extremely unique with the United States, built over time. When it comes to our NORAD missions, I mean Operation Carib, where we intercept thousands and thousands of kilograms of drugs that normally would be going into the U.S. So from a defense relationship, we are solid and will continue in that way. But when other aspects of trade, like these tariffs, and to use the clause where it says a nation is considered a national security threat, and then you impose tariffs, to put Canada into that mix is extremely insulting. I think all Canadians feel that way. And I expressed my significant concerns on it, that we need to have this addressed, because our Canadian defense industry is linked. We're doing tremendous work together, some things that Canadians can be very proud of, the U.S. Citizens can also be very proud of, that we're actually making a tangible impact. When Canada-U.S. works together, we send a very strong message to our allies, and that's something of a message that sent very clearly, and something that they understand.
Minister, they may understand, but at the same time, you've got President Donald Trump tweeting out a few days ago that those tariffs are a win for the U.S., that they've actually buoyed the steel industry there. The steel producers here are saying that your government should be waiting to ratify NAFTA until you secure some kind of exemption on these tariffs. Are you willing to go that far, considering, as you say, they understand it, but their actions haven't changed?
And the new NAFTA that has been agreed upon, I think, has been a very significant accomplishment for all three nations, and we can celebrate that, and we look forward to ratifying that. I think it's very important.
But how are you going to convince them to change their posture on those tariffs?
But I think this is the type of discussions that we're also having. I think when it comes to some of the concerns that the president might have when it comes to the tariffs, we need to be able to demonstrate what that relationship is. And what I'm hopeful on is sometimes you don't fully appreciate the relationship that's there, especially when it comes to a defense relationship or some of the work that we do together with our defense industry. And sometimes it's just about making sure that the knowledge base is passed on. But I wanted to make sure that our viewpoint was expressed not just from a government perspective, but also from a defense perspective.
Did you, in your meeting with your U.S. counterpart today, discuss the situation in Venezuela?
No, we did not. We talked about many different challenges. We had opportunities on a number of occasions to discuss this, and our position has been very clear on Venezuela and the leadership role that Canada has been taking on this.
I'm sure that you're aware that the leadership in the U.S., specifically Donald Trump, and today even Vice President Mike Pence, have threatened the use of military intervention in Venezuela. What is the Canadian government's position on that? Have you ruled out Canadian military intervention in Venezuela should the U.S. proceed?
I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done when it comes to making sure that there is a peaceful transition in government, and I think those avenues need to be explored and pushed, because I think military intervention is far too premature.
Far too premature. Does that mean that that Canada, though, has ruled out participating should the U.S. proceed in that? And I'm asking because, of course, so far your position, the Canadian government's position, has been in concert with the U.S. In criticizing the Maduro regime and advocating for the opposition leader to become president of Venezuela. Are you ruling out Canadian military action?
It's very important for us to be able to making sure that when it comes to discussions, we work with our allies and move towards a peaceful transition. That's something that's very important. It's very important for Venezuela as well. And I'm sure that when it comes to our diplomats and Minister Freeland will be leading the charge on this, and they'll be able to work the appropriate options and find a diplomatic solution moving forward.
I understand what you're saying. I just want to be clear, though, because you lead the military. Are you saying no to? And it's not coming out of nowhere. Like the U.S. is specifically today. Mike Pence said all options are on the table. This is the time for action. So I just want to be clear. Are you, do you have concerns about military U.S. intervention, and would Canada be a part of that at all?
I think it's very important for right now to just have us to have a much wider discussion, given where the current situation is at. It's very important for us to focus on a peaceful transition moving forward. Any type, I think it's far too premature to have any discussion regarding any type of military actions. We need to allow the diplomatic space and the experts to be able to move forward. And I know that Minister Freeland has worked incredibly on this with her counterparts on this, and we look forward to those discussions.
Before I let you go, Minister, I want to ask you about an issue closer to home. The pretrial hearing for Vice Admiral Mark Norman has brought the military's use of code names into focus. I know you can't comment on what's before the courts, but how concerned are you, more generally speaking, that the military may be using code names to divert public access to D&D records?
When it comes to the military, our military is a professional organization, and I expect everybody in not only in uniform and our civilians to be able to live up to to do everything that they do in an extremely professional manner.
Using code names to block public access, is that okay with you?
As I stated, when it comes to that discussions, it'll be irresponsible for me to be able to discuss any matters that's being discussed in this court case.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Minister Sajjan. Appreciate your time.
Great, nice talking to you.
You too.
Venezuela actually doesn't have a president right now because Maduro is not the president of Venezuela in the eyes of the world and also in the eyes of Venezuelans. The ongoing humanitarian catastrophe in the region means they need to have elections right away, free and fair elections immediately. We are moving forward on recognizing Juan Guaido, who is the president of the National Assembly, as the interim president, so we can move towards free and fair elections.
That was the Prime Minister last night at a town hall in Milton, Ontario, where he defended Canada's position on the crisis in Venezuela. President Nicolas Maduro and opposition leader Juan Guaido are both vying for power in Caracas. Canada followed the U.S. last week and backed Guaido, who is calling on the military to turn against Maduro. The country's economy has collapsed under his rule since 2013. So what role can the international community play here? Eric Farnsworth is Vice President of the Council of the Americas, a business organization dedicated to promoting economic development, free trade, and democracy through the Western Hemisphere. Mr. Farnsworth previously served in various roles in the U.S. State Department, the U.S. Trade Representative, and the White House. He joins us from Washington. Hi, Mr. Farnsworth. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
There are more protests expected this weekend in Venezuela. I'm wondering what your take is on the idea of some kind of breakthrough in the stalemate that's gripping the country. Do you foresee it coming?
Well, probably not in the immediate term. I mean, a breakthrough would require one of the two sides to back down, and I don't see Maduro and his immediate supporters agreeing to leave anytime soon. And interim President Guaido has the support of the international community, so I don't see him necessarily backtracking either. So we do have a standoff. I think the protests, depending on how they go this weekend, could be instrumental in maintaining the momentum of the Guaido interim government to try to force action, but clearly this has a ways yet to go.
Who or what holds the key to unlocking the stalemate? Is it the military?
Well, I think the military holds a very large key. Whether it's the only one, I don't know, but clearly their voice is important. You know, what keeps Maduro in power is the fact that he has control of the security forces, and it's not just the military, it's also paramilitaries, it's the police, it's a full array of people with guns in Venezuela, whereas Guaido really doesn't control any security forces. So if the military and the security forces maintain loyalty to Maduro, it's going to be very difficult to dislodge him. If they transfer in whole or in part their loyalty to Guaido, you have a completely different situation. So I think the security forces clearly are an arbiter of the situation.
What kind of factors would contribute to a shift in the military support? Is it just something that would have to happen domestically? Is it outside pressure? Do you envision something like that happening?
Well, I think it's a combination of factors, and everybody's going to have to make their own decision. This is a deeply personal decision. Do you turn your back on the regime at high personal risk and go into the unknown, or do you try to ride it out? And I think there's a lot of people that are facing that decision right now, and it probably varies depending on what rank you hold, if you're a senior leader or if you're a junior person on the street. And the reason why is because the Chavez government before him and now the Maduro government have spent an awful lot of attention and priority to try to maintain the loyalty of the security forces. And so they've bought in senior levels of the military to corruption schemes. They've allowed them to a free hand in terms of drug trafficking. They've given them resources. They've given them special allowances for food and housing and such things. And so they're fully invested in the continuation of the regime. The lower level officials in the military and the security forces don't have the same level of benefits, don't have the same goodies, if you want to put it in those terms, and yet they are still living very difficult circumstances in Venezuela, and their families are, in terms of lack of food and medicine and schooling and all the rest that the regular population is. So it's a very difficult situation. But having said that, the intelligence services of Venezuela, which are supported by the Cubans and others, for example, the Russians as well, have a very good sense on who is doing what in the security establishment. So it's not easy. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to rebel today and have a successful rebellion. It's a lot more complicated than that. And so these are some of the calculations I think people are weighing right now.
Speaking of militaries, the U.S., of course, has not ruled out military intervention. I want to read you something that the Vice President just said moments ago. Mike Pence said, all options are on the table. Maduro should not test the resolve of the U.S. How likely do you think it is that the U.S. uses military intervention here?
I think at this stage, I think it's very unlikely. I understand the words that the Vice President has said, and all options are on the table. I mean, look, if Maduro went after U.S. diplomats or started rounding up U.S. citizens in Venezuela, of which there are many, then that would change the circumstances. But at this point, I don't see any appetite in Washington for any sort of military intervention in Venezuela. Having said that, I do believe that this administration, in conjunction with others, including Canada, members of the Lima Group, member countries in Europe, perhaps willing to take additional steps on sanctions, visa restrictions, travel restrictions, sanctions on assets, that sort of thing. And I think those will continue to be tightened and made more significant to the extent Maduro refuses to leave.
And I do want to ask you about the Lima Group, but on the subject of U.S. military intervention, what do you make of the rhetoric, and do you think it is helpful or unhelpful? And I ask because, of course, taking into account U.S. history in Venezuela, you hear, or in that region, I'm sorry, you hear so much of the criticism of what's happening right now geared towards the possibility of military intervention and the threats of it that we've heard specifically from the president. What do you make of the rhetoric?
Yeah, I think that's all very true. And the fact is, nothing occurs in a vacuum. We do have a certain history, and people are aware of that. At the same time, the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela is so significant that I think we have to separate from history and look at the Venice situation today in terms of what it is and how we got here and what are the best tools that we have to try to get out of that. But I can tell you with certainty that people, at least in Washington, are looking for virtually every tool that they can employ to try to change behavior in Caracas without resort to the use of force for some of the reasons you mentioned, but also it's not at all certain what would occur the day after something like that. I mean, you can decapitate the regime, you can take out the leadership, but Venezuela is a huge country of over 30 million people. It's very diverse geographically. It has a lot of differences, and it has, Colombian-based guerrillas somewhere, in the western part of the country. It has different security forces all over the place. So it's not a quick and easy in and out sort of thing, and I think a lot of people would acknowledge that.
Is it a mistake to threaten it, though? Does it sort of add to whatever Maduro is trying to argue?
Well, it does give him a certain ammunition to be able to say, here they go again, right? And for those who don't know the Venezuela situation very well, that can be compelling. But for those who have watched Venezuela, know how we got here, that's really rhetoric, and it's pretty thin.
Before I let you go, I do want to ask you about the Lima Group, because Canada is scheduled to host an emergency meeting of that group here on Monday in Ottawa. What, if anything, can the Lima Group do to advance its desired outcome of seeing the self-declared interim president Juan Guaido assume power of the country and Maduro deposed?
You know, I really think Canada's played an important leadership role in this whole effort, not just in the context of the Lima Group, but also bilaterally in terms of some of the sanctions that have been levied. And it's been a very important actor. You know, what can the Lima Group do? You know, I think there are several things. They can restrict travel to their travel of Venezuelan officials to their countries. They can find and seize assets that have been illegally gained. And also a number of the members of the Lima Group, frankly, are being directly impacted by these the humanitarian crisis, which is being represented by millions of Venezuelans who are leaving the country and finding themselves in Colombia and Ecuador and Brazil and Peru, etc. And so they are being directly impacted by the collapse of Venezuela. They have a huge direct interest in trying to resolve that, in trying to increase humanitarian assistance, and frankly trying to get humanitarian assistance into Venezuela to meet the people where they really are. So to the extent that the Lima Group can continue to highlight diplomatically what's going on in Venezuela and also help address the humanitarian crisis, I think those are two immediate things that would pay real benefits and really contribute to an overall solution.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thanks a lot for your insight, Mr. Farnsworth.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.